I'll pass the floor to you.
Thanks very much, Jimmy. Have we got the slides to share?
Are you sharing from your?
Oh, I can do that. Yeah.
Yes, of course you can do that.
Okay, sure. Let me pull the slides up then. So hopefully you can see this. So good afternoon, everybody. So thank you, Jimmy. My name is Scott Kelly. I'm joined with my colleague Thomas Howe. We're based in Sydney, and we work for Real Asset Management. I'll just tell you a little bit about the company, and then we'll move on to talking about investing during the COVID period, beyond, and how we've been investing more recently, both in under migration programs and more broadly.
大家下午好。那这位是 Scott Kelly， 那我是 Thomas。那 Scott 呢，他会在这个时候跟大家介绍，就是关于澳洲的移民还有投资的这个方向，那以及说在这个后疫情时代，那有什么怎么样的投资机会。那我们都是在悉尼，在澳洲。那大家有什么如果来这边的话呢，也可以找我们。
Thanks, Thomas. So just quickly to introduce our company, we are a fully independent wealth and asset management business based in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. We also have fully licensed operations in Hong Kong, and a joint venture in London, and recently opened an office in Shanghai.
那我们公司Real Asset Management 澳洲皇家资产管理集团，那我们是一个财富管理集团。那我们在这个悉尼、墨尔本、布里斯班、香港都有办公室。那我们现在在伦敦呢，也成立了一个新的办公室。那我们为这个高净值客户呢提供这边的这个理财服务。那我们的这个服务呢也涵盖就是说澳洲这边的移民这些等等的。
There is a saying that you're only as good as the people within a business. And we have a deep bench of very experienced people, over 54 people in the organization now, with decades of experience in managing money for high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals and families all over the world. I was managing director of UBS Wealth Management in Australia before joining RAM, and Thomas held a senior relationship management role at ICBC in Australia before joining us, by way of example.
那有一个说法吧，就是说这个资产管理呢，基金公司它的这个这间公司有多好，就是主要是由它的这个人员，还有它的人员的经验，还有优不优秀来做决定的。那我们公司一共目前的话已经是有大概54个人员。那 Scott 呢，他以前是在瑞士银行 UBS 是 UBS 的总裁。那我个人的话，我以前是在这个中国工商银行当过中国工商银行的这个私人银行部的这边的这个担任这边的这个主管这样。
We manage $1 billion in Australia, and much of that money is managed under migration programs such as a significant investor visa program. We like to think we take a long-term approach with our clients, and we understand their circumstances. One of the reasons that we understand our circumstances is that, and Thomas and I are both in this camp, is that we've been through the migration process to Australia ourselves. I'm British. I moved here 10 years ago. I found an Aussie lady who was silly enough to want to marry me in London, and we moved to Australia, where we now live in Sydney and enjoy the kind of lifestyle that we promote to others.
那能够真正的了解我们的客户呢，同时也就是说我们除了在这个理财方面呢，能够去对我们的客户这边有一个合乎到客户的需求，同时我们能够去真正的了解客户，主要是因为说我们也是曾经移民过来澳洲的。那像 Scott 呢 ，Scott 他是这个以前他跟他的说法是说他遇到了一个女孩，那这个 这位女孩呢，可能那时候就嫁给他了。那嫁给他之后呢，it's hard to translate silly.
Foolish enough to marry me.
应该说眼睛没有睁亮，嫁给了他。那嫁给了他之后呢，他移民来了澳洲。那同样的，我个人也是有这个移民的经验。那我是从台湾移民到澳洲来，那也在这边，我是从小就移民过来了。所以说，我们能够在这个除了了解除了投资的部分以外呢，我们也可以去了解我们的客户，在这个感同身受，了解客户在接下来的移民，还有移民之后的投资的这些需求。
So moving on to the first point. So the first point we're going to talk about today is the COVID-19 update and how it is affecting Australia.
那接下来的话呢，我们会讲第一点，就是讲说这个新冠疫情最新的更新。那还有就是说，新冠疫情是对澳洲的影响是什么？
So as you might have picked up in the news, and to borrow the words of the Prime Minister, Australia is doing better than most. So as you can see on the charts on the right-hand side, we're now down to a very low level of new cases, less than 10 a day on average. And very much so, we're embarked on the lifting of the lockdown. In most states, it varies a little bit. In most states, that's very well progressed now.
那大家应该在新闻里面都有看到，就是说澳洲目前的这个新冠疫情的这个情况呢，实际上是比较有好转了。那在这个世界上，澳洲的这个新冠的疫情的目前的所控制的程度呢，也是在这个世界上是数一数二的。那我们现在澳洲的经济呢，也渐渐的在慢慢的开放，就现在后疫情时代吧。那我们现在的这个经济活动也渐渐的在开放，那让澳洲这边的经济渐渐的复苏。
So as you can see here, by most measures, if you look at people spending on their credit cards, if you look at their mobility, i.e. how much are they moving around Sydney and Melbourne, the auction clearance rates, and government spending on benefits such as unemployment benefits. You may have heard of the JobKeeper allowance. All of those measures are pointing to things getting back to normal in Australia far quicker than we anticipated they would do.
那大家可以在这边看到，就是那澳洲这边的一些数据呢，像是不论是消费也好，还是像是这个拍卖，就是房产的这个拍卖的清仓率，那这些数据都可以显示说，我们现在的这个经济的恢复，实际上是比我们预期的还要好的。那这个效果呢，也渐渐的开始很显著。那也可以看得到政府的这个补助支出的部分。那澳洲在这个疫情的时候，实际上是为了这些失业的，还有就是被留职停薪的人，他们办理了一个所谓叫 JobKeeper， 还有这个 Job Seeker 的这个补助吧。那现在这个补助的支出呢，也渐渐的减少，也可以看得出，在对澳洲的这个经济情况呢，是有一个显著的一个效果的。
So that's been the update on the virus. So what's been the impact on the economy and the markets? And here you can see a summary of this. So what we're trying to make out is that we know this will come to an end, but how long will this period of COVID-19 be, and how deep will the economic scars be that it leaves?
那我们从这边呢，就是说接下来在后疫情时代，那这个后疫情时代呢，这个疫情到底对我们的这个经济影响到底是有多大？那像就是说疫情过后，它对于经济的这个创伤以及创伤之后的这个回复，它是能够做出多少的回复？那这个是我们接下来要看的地方。
So another way of thinking about that is, will it be a V-shaped recovery, U-shaped recovery, or we're into the Great Depression? That's the sort of three things that people are talking about. I think we can discount the V-shaped recovery because things just won't get back to normal very quickly, just in a few months. But equally, we can discount the Great Depression, a second Great Depression. The reason for that is you can see down here that there has been extremely large levels of economic stimulus from most governments around the world, including Australia. And those have been delivered much more quickly and much more to a greater extent than they were even during the global financial crisis. So we don't think we're going into a second depression, which leaves us into a kind of U-shaped recovery as being our central scenario.
那这个疫情之后，现在我们要看的这个反弹呢，它是究竟是 V 型的、U 型的，甚至于还是大萧条。那首先的话，我们是可以排除了 V 型吧。那因为主要的是因为现在的这个市场呢，它确实是有些反弹，但是反弹它没有回到原先的高点。那这个 V 型的反弹呢，实际上它是比较不切实际的这么一个预期。那当然，我们现在也可以排除掉大萧条，因为这个大萧条，大家看到这个右下角的这个图表，那右下角这图表呢，可以看得出各个不同的国家在不同的政府，他们在这个经济里面呢互助了是有多少的这个刺激方案。那这些经济刺激呢，它其实是在适当的时候出了这个正确的这个刺激方案呢，实际上是能够避免这个大萧条的。
So you can see that what we suggest in terms of the recovery is that we have a negative GDP in Q2, this quarter, that we're about flat in Q3, and then we gradually start to grow again in Q4, and that we have a much stronger recovery in 2021. And you can see here that we're anticipating just a bit over 6% GDP growth for Australia. If you compare that to other countries, for example, Malaysia would still be -5 in Q3 and minus in Q4. So I think Australia will be recovering, we think, probably quicker than most countries around the region.
那澳洲的这个回复呢，大家可以看得到，在第二季的时候呢，是一个澳洲的这个 GDP， 也就是这个经济成长率呢是负数的。那接下来我们在第三季的预期呢，是一个走平的情况，就是打平的情况，它不负不正吧，就大概在0这边。那接下来在这个图上可以看得到，在这个明年2021年呢，我们会有一个比较高的预期。那澳洲的在同一个地区呢，就是说在这个东南亚跟这个西太平洋这附近呢，这一区的国家来说，相较来说呢，澳洲的这个经济成长，也就是说澳洲的这个复苏是会相比之下会是比较大的。那可以看得到在这个2021年的预期呢，澳洲的就是红色的这一根杠子，那澳洲的这个经济复苏呢，经济活动的复苏会是比我们这一区西太平洋这边的这些国家相较之下会是更好一点。
And you can see here that as things have improved, generally speaking, ahead of schedule, the Aussie dollar has started to rally as well. Although it still represents, if you think about the start of this chart, it has been declining as commodity prices have declined. So it still represents probably a good long-term buying opportunity for the Aussie dollar if you were thinking about converting out of Malaysian ringgits or Singapore dollars or other Southeast Asian currencies. So we would anticipate the Aussie dollar to continue to strengthen. So I would get busy with transfers if you were thinking about that.
那澳币对美金来讲呢，那大家可以看得到，就是说虽然说澳币对美金看到这个右上角这个图可以看得到，它其实虽然说澳币对美金一直都是以一个渐渐的缓跌的一个趋势在走，那主要的原因是因为是受到原物料的影响。那在这段时间呢，虽然说澳币对美金是有一个显著的一个跌幅，那但是它也很快的恢复了它的这个价位。那澳币对美金呢，我们认为在这段时间呢会是一个不错的买点。那因为毕竟原物料它的跌幅也跌到了一个程度了，那在接下来呢，它很有可能的是接下来继续打底。那澳洲的这个经济复苏也会伴随着澳洲的经济复苏，那澳币它也会有接下来跟着成长的这个机会，所以说现在买澳币是一个好的时机。
So moving on to the last point, in how we've been investing during this period, and then probably looking at how we would invest in the longer term after the effects of COVID-19. So as you can see here, we've got the performance of our significant investor visa portfolios. We've just taken an average portfolio there. And as you can see, the portfolio has held up well. So this is the last 6 months, or actually a bit longer to April. We're still annualizing at around about 5%, whereas the markets have been very volatile and obviously some deep declines in emerging companies, which is part of the SIV framework.
那大家可以在这边看，就是说我们现在跟大家讲，就是说我们的目前后疫情时代，我们的投资是怎么做的，那到底有受到什么影响等等的。那当然，在大额投资移民的合规投资里面，确实里面有要求要投小型股票。那小型股票呢，也受到了一些影响，但是我们仍然能够维持在这段期间呢，维持我们的客户在这8月的这个去年8月到今年的4月这段期间呢，维持在年化5%的收益。
So people have noticed that we've done probably a lot better than a lot of our competitor fund managers, and that's because, for 2 reasons. Number one is our tactics, which I'll come on to, and secondly, that fundamentally, we say we specialize in boring. We like to deliver a very consistent, lower risk approach to clients, because we think that when people are investing overseas, they don't want to worry about that money. They just want it as safe and secure and as consistently performing as they possibly can. So that's the first reason that we've kind of done well, is that we're likely to. We're a conservative bunch.
那很多人问我们说，那你们怎么能够在这段时间之内，那在疫情的这段时间，还能够为客户提供一个正向的这么一个回报？那我们的原因是因为，其实跟其他基金公司不太一样的是，我们其实是很保守的。那也就是说，我们投的东西都是有防御性的，就是为这段时间呢，就是一直都是为了这个不让它跟市场的波动走太多。那所以说，我们在这段期间还是能够为客户提供一个正向的一个回报。
So in terms of the short-term tactics, the other things we've done is that we've avoided some of the traps. So number one, we haven't invested for our SIV clients. We never invest in property development because we think it's the wrong time. It's the late stage of the investment cycle. So we avoid property development. We've avoided some of the higher risk areas of the property market, such as hotels and pubs and so on. And whereas our property investment has been focused partly through luck and partly through judgment on supermarkets and medical property. The reason we like those is because they're very low risk and they're not economically sensitive. Obviously, that's turned out to be really, really the case during the COVID period, as supermarkets have traded very well, and obviously medical property is even more popular than it was 6 months ago.
那再来就是说，像我们不做的一些投资，那这段时间我们其实也躲掉了一些地雷吧。那这是所谓的地雷，就是说像这个对市场敏感的物业，还有就是说像这个开发这些的。那我们认为就是说大额投资移民的客户，实际上是并不太适合这些开发的投资，因为它毕竟是一些高风险，毕竟它没有盖好的东西，风险还是比较高的。那我们投什么呢？我们投的像是一些比较防御性的商业物业，像是超市或者是医疗。那这些物业这些商业物业呢，他们都是你不论经济好还是经济坏，你都是需要这个民生的必须的这些地方吧。那不论是经济好还是经济坏，你都还是要去买菜的。那要生病了还是要看医院的。那他们的这一种类型的物业呢，它实际上它的投资回报它是更加的稳定的。
So the final point I would say about our tactics is we tend to invest, when we invest in equities, and you must do in the under the SIV rules, we tend to have a focus on defensive, lower risk equities, both in the private markets, private equities, and also in the public markets, such as the emerging companies bucket. And that's obviously been a much far more beneficial tactic in the short term, because we've avoided some of the volatility that others have experienced.
那从证券上来说的话呢，那证券有分两种了，有私募股权跟这个上市的证券啊。那这个是在大的投资里面也是必须投的。那在上市的证券跟这个甚至于就是说私募股权的部分，我们在这两个不同的这个区块呢，投的也都是比较属于稳定的。那像是股票来说，我们其实是可以选比较防御性的这些股票证券。那虽然说它是小型股，但是这些还是找得到的。那同样的，在这个私募股权的部分呢，我们对于这个尽职调查，还有就是说它的这个公司的营运，还有它的这个目前成熟度在哪里，这些都是我们注目的一些焦点。
So just to give you a flavor of the type of things in our portfolios, I've mentioned the supermarkets. Those are Coles and Woolworths, and as you can see here, they've been very busy during this period, and we all know how those have traded very well. Medical property you can see on the right hand side, and we don't build any hospitals, we just buy them and rent them out. And even on the venture capital, which is obviously an area that the private markets is very people are worried about it, because the government says you should invest in Australian private equity. Even in some of those, so we've listed Carbon Revolution, which is co-investment with Victorian governments. We've even had an investment in a face mask company called Clean Space, or Pavtech it used to be known as. And even this is Elenium, who made airport kiosks. And you might think, well, that's a terrible thing to be investing in because no one's going through airports. But actually what they've done is they've pivoted, and they use these kiosks now for when you go into buildings and register, like an office tower. You would take your temperature and your heart rate to identify whether you are sick or not. So this could be a very exciting company. So even in the private equity space, we seem to have got a few winners there.
那在大家可以看到这边这一页里面的图啊，那这些是我们投资的一些项目跟资产。那首先可以看得到超市，那这个超市的部分呢，这些照片是在这个疫情的时候所照的。那大家可以看得到说这个超市的这个他们目前的生意呢是门庭若市啊。那接下来就是医疗房产呢，医疗房产这边就是我们其实是不盖医院的，我们这些医疗房产都是买已经盖好的医院。那已经在营业，已经在经营，我们就只是收个租金而已。那所以同样的也是非常的保守，还有也是这个防御性的一些资产。那再来就是私募资产，私募资产的话呢，虽然说是一个比较令人担心的这么一个区块吧，但是在私募的市场呢，可以看得到，就是说我们投资的一些项目呢，像这些都是在疫情之前投的，那像是一些。像电子口罩的项目，这个 Clean Space 是一个电子口罩的项目。那他现在的口罩呢，现在已经是不止在澳洲内销，也外销到美国，然后还有新加坡，还有甚至于日本、台湾等等的。那再来就是这个还有一个这个右边的这个小小的这个萤幕呢，这个实际上它是一个直机系统。那这个自助直机系统呢，大家会有点担心，觉得说，哎，这个直机系统现在机场又没有人了，怎么会有人用这个直机系统就没有人用？但是相反的，这间公司呢，它在这个疫情的时候呢，反而利用了这段时间，它去研发了一个出奇辨识的这个方式。那它可以在这个客户，就是说旅人在办理值机的时候，它可以去判断说你是不是有疑似的症状，接下来来判断说能不能发这个机票。那这个系统呢，现在很受各大国家的这个主要的一些机场欢迎，那它接下来呢，这间公司的这个发展也是能够有所期待的。
So that's the kind of short-term tactics. What I'll do now is just talk about the kind of longer-term prospects and how we think that COVID-19 period will affect the world, including investing in Australia. So here we have lots of market returns. These aren't returns that RAM has delivered. It's just the market indices for different asset classes. Aussie dollar cash, Aussie bonds, equities, commercial property, residential property, and an average of all of them. What you have in the blue bar is the historic return of these asset classes. So you could see cash would have given you, just a bit less than 4 historically. And then in the red bar, we've got a longer term forecast. So we thought, for example, pre-COVID, that interest rates are coming down, so you're going to get less on your cash. That's true of all currencies and including an Aussie dollar. But the grey bar represents the 2 years post-COVID. So what we're saying is that, for example, if you take my interest rate example, interest rates in Australia now are at 25 basis points. 3-year bonds are at 25 basis points. They're going to stay like that for at least 2 or 3 years, we think, until we get a longer term recovery. So we think that in the next 2 to 3 years, we've modified again our expectations of future returns. So you can see here that overall returns will be lower than history, and some asset classes are impacted more than others.
那这一页解释的是一个后疫情时代的目前这个投资回报率的一些变化吧。那我们现在讲的是一个比较长远的一些策略。那首先可以看得到说，这个蓝色的这一条呢，蓝色这一条是过往的这个各类别的资产的投资回报率。那深红色、暗红色这个呢，是在没有疫情之前我们的一个长期的预期。那换句话讲，就是说，如果今天没有疫情的话，那红色这个会是一个比较长期的回报，就是一个长期的这一个预期的回报率。那但是因为现在有了疫情了，所以说疫情过后的这个后疫情时代的这个回报率呢，是灰色的这一条。那可以看得到，就是说，在这个回报率来讲的，从这回报率角度来讲呢，红色的、暗红色的跟灰色的这一块，实际上在长期预期有一些资产类别，它受到这个疫情的影响是会比较大的。那有一些资产类别，它所受到疫情的影响会比较小。那拿澳元来说，澳币基金、澳币现金的这个投资回报率来说呢，那现在的澳币的这个利息是在这个 0.25， 那所以说大概在 0.25 到 0.3% 左右，实际上是非常低的。那如果说没有疫情的情况之下，我们预期可能会是在 1% 左右。那因为现在有了疫情，再加上说政府现在在慢慢的释放一些这个就是说它像是一些刺激政策吧，那所以说会导致利息会维持在一些低位。所以大家可以看得出来，就是说现在这些刺激政策实际上对各大资产的这个影响呢是可大可小，但是每一个资产它的这个所受的影响都是不一样的。
So you can see that cash and bonds, people will start looking for an alternative for that, and we have a very popular one of those. Residential property will be impacted by unemployment rates. We did think that unemployment was going to go up to about 15, but probably it will go up to about 8 or 9 in Australia. It had been about, well, it was 5.2 in January. So the things that look attractive relative in this environment, or more attractive than they were, is principally commercial property. And that's why we've had clients looking for a replacement for cash and inflows into our commercial property, and they've probably held off buying residential property as much as they did previously. You know, naturally you would put your money in term deposits, and maybe you would buy a house for your kid in Perth or wherever it might be. It's not quite as attractive as it was. So that's why our focus is on commercial property and finding a replacement for cash and bonds for people.
那市场的资金呢是会流动的，那这个在像现金或者是债券这一些类别的资产呢，因为它的回报降低了，所以说市场的现金会往别的资产类别去流动。那往别的资产类别去流动的话，那同时也可以看得到说，住宅房产它现在的这个它也受到疫情的影响也是蛮大的，那它的回报呢也从 5% 降到这个 3% 这样子。那在这一种它的投资回报率减少的情况，那大部分的客户就在我们目前的观察呢，是很多的客户他的这个很多投资人，他现在会把这个资金呢往别的方向去投。 那往别的方向去投，其中一个受到这个受到一个很多的这个客户的很多客户的这个投资的这个项目呢，就是我们的商业房产了。那商业房产的回报呢，还是维持在一个6%到7%的这个高档，所以说它对目前的很多的这些客户呢是非常有吸引力的。项目呢，就是我们的商业。
So, in terms of what opportunities we see now for clients, it might be a bit doom and gloom, but there are definitely opportunities as we have dislocation in markets. These are the sort of issues that I think we've been discussing with clients. You can see on the left-hand side. I can see that what the solution is in front of clients. So just going through them, you can obviously we've talked about the low interest rate. We can offer, short-term liquid investments from 2.75 up to 5%, which is obviously a multiple of a time deposit. Some visa holders, such as the 188B visa holders, or all the 188 visas, have to make an additional investment in the state that's relevant to their visa. So we have a range of investments that can help there. We've also noticed that some SIV clients are disappointed with their returns because they've been invested not with RAM, but with other managers. So we offer a free health check. We're happy to look through the investments to see if we think we could improve things for clients, and there's no cost there. And any client that switches, which is also a deal for Kitson, clients only, they can switch at a discount rate. We all have investments that are suitable if you're thinking about saving for your children's education in Australia. Extremely tax efficient with education bonds, which are not subject to CRS. And then we have some clients so as our clients come to the end of their 4 years of temporary residence, here in Australia, then that changes their investment criteria quite a lot. They don't have to stick to the visa rules anymore. They can invest freely, but they may become tax resident in Australia, which means they have to really adjust their the structure in which the way in which they hold their investments.
那我们接下来讲讲，就是说在后疫情时代的这些投资机会吧。那首先是像我们客户常常就是我们的客户还有投资人一般都会提出的一些问题跟我们的这个解决方案。那一般来讲就是说现在的这个利息它现在是非常的低的。那也就是说在这个低利环境之下，那我们也提供了低风险让有如现金般的这些投资。那它的这个年化收益呢，会根据客户的这个对流动性的要求，目前的这个年化收益是到2.75%到5%不等。那当然了，就是说188的话，除了188C 以外，188B 等等的，那这些签证呢，还是有其他的一些投资要求的，像是维州的州政府他们会要求188B 的客户，那在维州做出其他的多的这些投资。那我们这边呢，因为我们公司在维州，实际上我们在墨尔本是有办公室的，所以说我们的投资也是在这个188B 的额外投资是合规的。那我们也有多种的这些合规投资，那还有不同的这个回报率可以供您选择。那有些188C 的客户会说，那我在这个其他的这个基金公司的投资绩效呢没有达到预期，那甚至于对这个投资并不是一个非常的满意。那我们也可以帮您做这个投资的规划的一个见证，帮您看看就是说现在您的这个投资的这些规划还有它的配置到底问题出在哪里。那您可以就是根据这个见证呢，再去决定说你这个投资要怎么样子去去把它做个转换，或者是重新做一个配置。那如果说对现在的投资是失望的话，那我们会为 Kitson 的这个客户呢提供这个优惠。如果说您转到 RAM 的话，那这个是只有对 Kitson 的客户。那您的小孩子可能在澳洲读书，那我们这边也有相应的这个教育债券基金。那这个教育债券呢，实际上它对于这个尤其是在这边有小孩子的，那我们这边这些教育债券是能够提供节税的这个优势，那同时也可以 它也可以避免了这个 CRS， 也就是说是这个各国之间的这个CRS 就是各国之间的这个税务信息的交换。那另外就是说，取得888后的这个客户呢，因为取得888之后是不用再受188C 或者是188各种不同种类的这个投资的束缚了。也就是说，888之后的这个再投资呢，我们能够在结构上为您提供各种不同的方案，像是教育债券等等的，还有一些新的投资机会是以前没有的，因为在大投资移民还有这些投资移民的这些规则之下呢，它对于投资的项目管理是非常的严格的。那在没有这个投资的，在已经不受到这个投资的这个束缚之后，这个移民的投资束缚之后，我们能够给您提供更加灵活的这些投资方案。
So finally, just expanding that point, not to labor it, but when people initially invest in overseas Australia, that's often a time of change for them and their family, and we help them through that transition period. The second time of change is when they become permanently resident. And this just gives you a sense of what we do for our clients is when we take a portfolio that's very basic and we make it far more sophisticated. It can invest just in Australia, it can invest globally, and we protect it with various structures such as family trusts, education bonds, superannuation, and so on, to make sure that, you know, we all know the tax man in Australia is fierce. You know, it takes half of the return, 47% of the return, unless you're careful. So it's very important to get that right. We take clients to go and get tax advice to put the structuring together that, as you can see here, makes a significant difference to the returns that they enjoy in their back pocket.
那对于我们的这个移民的客户来讲呢，我们可以理解就是说，客户移民来澳洲的时候，他实际上是他的投资实际上是分2个阶段的，一个是投资移民它的硬性规定的要求，那另外一个是当投资移民过之后，没有这个要求之后，它的这个弹性还有要怎么样子去规划。那我们这边呢，会根据每个客户的情况，还有他就是说当时的经济环境，还有客户当时的情况，来为我们的客户提供出这个量身定制的这些方案。那我们会为您做出各类不同的报告。那会根据您的这个情况呢来做不同的结构。那这个结构的话，可以用像是养老金啊，甚至于是像是这个家族信托等等的这些结构呢，灵活运用来为客户提供一个最好的一个结果。因为在澳洲的话，澳洲是一个税务非常重的一个国家，那如果不小心的话呢，那很容易的就是把一半的这个收入就上交给这个政府了。那所以说，一个高效的税务结构，还有能够真正去了解您，能够了解投资人的这个基金公司，是一个非常重要的这么一个在您的这个移民呢是扮演一个非常重要的一个角色。
Thanks, Thomas. So that's the end of our presentation. We're very happy to sort of hand over back now, and thank you very much, Michael, and for the opportunity to chat to you and your clients today. I'm sure we might have some questions later on.
那谢谢大家今天的时间。那还有就是说，我们接下来会把这个，我们接下来把这个舞台吧还给这个 Jimmy 跟这个 Dato Michael。
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Thomas, for your clear explanation on the investment. I think most of our investors were really impressed with your portfolio returns. If you have any question about the investment portfolio or your investment direction, we will be open up the floor for Q&A after Dr. Michael's presentation. So now I will pass the floor to Dato.
Alina, 你的 microphone 还没有开。
对不起，感谢Scott跟 Thomas 的耐心分析。接着我们会在线上自由提问，在我们的Dato Michael 以后的演讲。先有请我们的Dato杨志成。
Dr. Michael will be focusing on explaining about the requirement for the investor and the business visa, 188A, B, and also C. Dato.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much, Alina and Jimmy. Really appreciate Scott and Thomas for taking our afternoon time and be able to podcast live in our Kitson channel. Viewers at home and those who are watching, thank you very much again for joining us this Saturday. We'll be running a series of investment opportunity together with RAM over these 3 months. This is the first one that we have, and we have another 2 more to come in the month of June and July. So today I will just share with you about the visa, and particularly I will talk about the business and the investor visa. So let me share a screen with you. So for those of you who are new to Kitson, let me do a quick introduction about Kitson. All right, so Kitson Advisory, actually, basically we have offices both in Australia and in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, we have quite a strong team of 10 of us, 10 of our Malaysian colleagues, where we operate from our KL office. Then we have one office in Bandar Utama at Center Point. We have a second office in Penang, on Kota Kinabalu, and we have a partner in base in Brunei. So back home in Australia, we originally from Brisbane, where a big team of my colleagues, about 20 of my colleagues who are based in the Brisbane office. And then in Adelaide, we have 2 additional colleagues. They are both Malaysian. They were transferred to the Adelaide office way back 2 years ago. So who we are? So in Kitson team, we have 6 registered migration agents. Beside that, and then we have a big pool of staff who are doing the supporting, and we have our own marketing and sales and marketing team too. So in terms of the migration agent, each of us are specialized in one particular visa. So for myself, I'm specialized in the business and investor visa. My colleague, Ms. Moon, she's also specialized in the skill migration visa. And those of you who want to know more about family category, employer category, we have different colleagues who are specialized in that visa. So why Kitson Migration? We are the best of both worlds. So we have our staff based in Australia to support you, and obviously where our customer base are in Malaysia and in Brunei. We also have our colleague and our staff supporting you back here. So in terms of operation, our Malaysia operation, this is our 11 years of operation. And in terms of combination of our experience, we have more than 30 years of experience. So just number of clients that we service, we have done more than 14,000 clients worldwide. Malaysia itself, Malaysia, Brunei, and Singapore, we basically have about 200 old family every year using our service. So what service do we provide? Initially, my team, if you have any inquiry and know more about the visa, do contact us, right? Later in our last slide, I will provide our contact number, or you can always put messages on our Facebook. So the first meeting is that we will assess your eligibility. So we will find out what are the visa that suits you, and then we will map out the pathway for your visa. So some of you may be entitled for 2 or 3 pathways, so we will share with you the cheapest and the shortest pathway. Then when you start the application, our role will be advising you in documentation submission. So for the next 12 to 18 months, while waiting for your visa to be processed, my local staff team here will be assisting you in gathering documents and then advising you how to prepare a document. And every single step, we will have a sales staff who will be a window to communicate with you. And then our service not only goes all the way until the visa is approved, we also continue our service after the visa grant, the post-grant. So this post-grant is something that I myself has experienced. As what Scott and Thomas mentioned, they are both migrants from a different country coming to Australia. Similar with me, I moved in way back 15 years ago. So when I got my permanent resident, I moved to Australia. Yes, it's a beautiful country, but there's a lot of question marks. So because of that experience I've gone through, we actually have team back in our Brisbane office and Adelaide office to assist you if you have any question in terms of children education, your Medicare, those of you are going for business and investment. So we will link you up with fund managers like RAM about investment. And those of you who have questions about tax and housing, we will link you up with accountant and also with property developer. Now, let me just move into the business pathway, the visa pathway. So there are actually multiple pathways for you to apply a permanent resident to move to Australia. So one of those pathways that a business owner or investor can go in is the business innovation and investor visa. So the number that Scott and Thomas was talking about, 188, IPAPA, all right? So 188 is the visa subclass number. There are actually multiple streams. There are more than 3 streams, but a very popular one, I will just focus on 188A, 188B, and 188C, all right? So IPAPA-A 是商务签证 ，IPAPA-B 是投资签证。Now IPAPA-C 我们经常说是 VIP 的签证 because the requirements are much more flexible, but the investment is much bigger. So let me start with 188A. So all the 188 visa is 2-stage. So when you first apply, you are given a 4 years provisional visa. So in that period, you are required to move to Australia and to meet the obligation requirement before you can convert into a permanent resident. So the permanent resident visa will be subclass 888. So all the 8's number, so very, very auspicious Chinese number to use. So on the first visa, the 188A, Business Innovation Visa, the requirement basically is that you obtain a temporary resident, you move over to Australia, and it's a very active visa. You have to run the business in Australia. So if you are someone who are having a successful business back home, if you find that you can uplift your business or you have time to spend to move to Australia to go in for this visa and to run a business in Australia, where the investment ranges depend on state, it can be around 200, it could be 500,000, it could be $1 million, it depends on your appetite. That could be an option for you. Yeah. So however, if you are a businessman and you can't spend so much time overseas or in Australia, there are other options of visa which I will come into on the 188B and 188C. So what is the requirement for 188A? So 188的条件是什么呢? One is that your age, you must be under 55. Now, there is an English requirement for this visa. However, the good news about this visa is that you can actually pay for exemption. 这个签证也是有英文的要求。假如说你觉得你不想去考那英文，也许你觉得比较麻烦了，没有时间。然后它有一个另外一个方式，你可以还钱还钱给欧洲政府 ，then you get exemption for the English. And this visa, very important, you must be a business owner. You have to own the business. So you must be a business owner for at least 2 years in the last 5 years. So if you are not a business owner, you may be a corporate person or you may be someone who go into investment and you have acquired a certain number of wealth. There are other pathways for you to go for. It could be the 188B or 188C visa. And for this visa, your turnover of your business that you own must be at least $500,000 Australian dollar. Your net asset, 800,000 Australian dollar. And for me to do this visa, my team will actually sit down with you. We always invite you over to Australia. Before the pandemic, we actually have our staff going to Australia every month. I myself travel about 2 weeks back to Australia. And most of the time that I'm in Australia is to accommodate our clients. So you guys come over to Australia. If you are keen to do your business investment in Melbourne, Victoria, we will be there to meet you. You are keen to go to Adelaide, we are there to meet you. And then we will be able to discuss with you what are your business options you want to go for and how we're going to introduce the business broker for you, or you're going to start a new business. So for the business migration visa, there are basically certain conditions for you to fulfill during the 4 years of the visa. So you have to meet certain turnover, you have to bring some asset, and you must spend time in Australia. So that will allow you to convert in the 888 visa. So how long do you need to spend time in Australia for this visa? 188A. In the last 2 years, you must spend at least 1 year in Australia. So every time when we present a business visa to our client, we always have questions where clients say, is there any visa that I can stay less because I'm a successful businessman, I have a vast network of business back home, I do not have so much time to go to Australia to run a business. I just prefer to have a PR. What are the options? So that visa will come in on the third one, which I'll talk about, the 188C. Okay, now move on to the next visa is the 188B investor visa. 这个是投资移民. So this visa is a very passive visa. Now the requirement for this visa is you must be under 55 years of age. And again, your English, you can pay for exemption. You need to demonstrate that you have experience either managing investment or business. So if you are not a business owner, that's fine, right? As long as you can demonstrate you have investment, you can go for this visa. So what is the dollar value? Now, you need to prove to them you have a net asset of at least 2.25 million that you own it in the last 2 years. So it must be your own money. It can't be gifted. It can't be said, oh, I want to give this visa to my children or to my child. I will pump in the money for them. No, it don't work that way. However, the 188C visa can work that option. So when we prepare for this visa, when we prepare the application in, it takes about 12 to 18 months for the visa to be granted. So before the visa grant, they will ask you to prepare 1.5 million into Australia Treasury bond. So once you transfer the money into the government bond, they will issue you the visa. Now, the government bond will also attract interest. You are given interest. As Scott chart has shown that the bond interests are very low. Yes, it's true. The interest that the state are given is giving out right now is less than 1%. Some is 0.75, some is like 0.8. So it's very, very low. And you will be given an interest for every 6 months. Right. So as I say, this visa, you basically need to either have ownership of a business or you have experience doing investment. So this is a very passive visa, and for you to convert into a permanent resident, there are basically 2 key conditions. One of it is that you must stay 2 years in the last 4 years. So when I say stay 2 years in the last 4 years, a lot of our clients will say, wow, that's a long time. I will be caught into the tax resident. I may be an Australian tax resident if I do that. So some of our clients say, okay, why don't I send my wife to be there? So the good thing about this visa is that when you convert into a permanent resident, you can switch from husband to wife. So husband could be the main applicant, or the wife could be the main applicant. When you convert into a permanent resident, if your wife fulfill the 2 years in the 4 years stay, so she can be the main applicant. And throughout the 4 years, the bond must be kept with the state government. Okay, now let me go on to the highlight of today's presentation, the visa that blend in very well. And as Jimmy has said, this is a VIP visa. This visa basically, RAM has a multiple product that will suit you for you to put in the investment. So the 1A visa, we call it Significant Investor Visa, SIV in short. So this visa, the investment amount is $5 million. So there is some funds that the government will indicate you need to invest, the breakdown of the fund, which Thomas and Scott are happy to explain to you how the $5 million is channeled into it. And the other requirement for this visa is that the source of fund can be gifted. Oh, that's a wonderful thing. So as long as you can demonstrate the source of fund is clean, right? The clean money, even though it's gifted, is fine. So once we process the visa after about 12 to 18 months before they grant you, they say, hey, it's time for you to park in your $5 million into Australia. So that's where RAM comes in. She's based in Malaysia. She's here to be able to support our Malaysian clients. She can actually visit you. And before we actually prepare to do the visa, she can actually lay down the type of investment that you are keen in. And we will need some paperwork from her for us to submit this visa. Well, the good thing about this visa is the resident requirement is only 40 days in each year. So that is the attractive of this visa. So a lot of clients say, I want to avoid tax resident. Even my wife also have a lot of assets. I want to avoid tax resident. This could be an option for you. And the good thing about this visa, you can extend. First you give you 4 years, you can extend another 2 more years and another 2 more years. So which means you can actually drag it up to 8 years before you convert into a PR and before you decide to move on to Australia. So this is one of the key selling point for this visa. And another one that is also very attractive is there's no age limit. So regardless of your age, however, there's a health check when we are doing this visa. So if you're healthy, all right, all good. So no age limit. So this is an option for you, for those who are going in for a $5 million visa, we call it, with a very low resident requirement. Okay, let me just summarize 3 of the visa I just shared earlier on. 188A, the one in blue, this is a very active visa, which means you get a visa, you move to Australia, you have to run the business. You have to hire local staff, you have to demonstrate that you have assets there before you incorporate into PR. And there is a minimum resident requirement. Then the investor visa, which is, I always joke as it as a goyang kaki visa in Bahasa, which means it's like a retirement visa. You basically park 1.5 million to government bond. However, you need to stay there 2 years in the last 4 years before you can convert into a permanent resident. Now, most clients that go in for this visa will always complain, oh, the interest rate is so low. With that, for 1.5 million over 4 years, with a bond interest of less than 1%, if I were to put it somewhere else, I can easily make multiple times. True enough. That's why in this investor visa, at the end of the 1.5 million, the 4th year, the fund will be returned to you. The treasury will return it to you. Before you convert into a permanent resident. Then when we do the application for the permanent resident, the 888 visa, you are required to demonstrate that this 1.5 million is still invested in Australia. That's where Kelly has just shared. RAM has a good product for those who are considering putting investment into Australia. So your 1.5 million from the government bond here back to your account, and you'll be good at speak with RAM, and they can actually prepare the right investment for you, and you can actually switch over the investment. Then again, when we convert you to the 888 permanent resident visa, we also need those documents from RAM. Now, then the other visa, which is the SIB visa, yes, straightforward, no age limit, right? No need business experience, just to demonstrate you have $5 million, park the $5 million into a fund, and you'll need to stay 160 days in the last 4 years. Okay, that's the end on the business visa. Now, however, I always like to share one very, very important visa that a lot of people will start to question after they obtain their permanent resident, right? So what happened after I obtain my permanent resident? How do I renew it? So this is something that you have to plan ahead so that you know when you're going to migrate, how many days you're going to spend in Australia. Now, we call it the resident return visa, RRV. So once you obtain a permanent resident visa, your visa will be valid for 5 years, regardless if you go in as a skilled migrant, as an investor, as a business owner, or even a family category. So for you to renew the visa, the simplest way is that you need to stay 730 days in the last 5 years, then you will get a renewal for 5 years. So a resident return visa means that this visa will allow you to leave Australia and to come back to Australia. So if you are in Australia today and your visa is expiring tomorrow, don't worry, you are still a permanent resident. However, you need a resident return visa to leave. So the simple rule of thumb is stay 2 years in the last 5 years, you get 5 years. And for Australia permanent resident, you have to keep on renewing it until you go to heaven. So one way for people who are turning into a citizenship, then they can take out citizenship, then they can basically keep their citizen for life. Now, for business owner and investor, we have a big pool of our clients where they can't stay 2 years in the last 5 years. They are businessmen. They need to travel. They have the commitment, their business back home. So if you are in that situation, don't worry. If you hold a permanent resident, you can renew your visa on a yearly basis. So if your visa expires, the first round of 5 years, build one of these substantial ties in Australia, whether it's personal, business, employment, and cultural tie, you can renew it every year. So some of you may have the question and say, oh, if I apply for this visa, after 4 years, I convert into a PR for 5 years. In total, 9 years, I will not be considering to stay the 730 days in the last 5 years. You can always go for this option for you to renew every year. So stay tuned with us. Talk to us more often when you are having your permanent resident visa. Ask me any question during the journey. I have a lot of inquiry from our client almost every week about how to renew it. We will guide you through so that you can have one of these substantial ties for you to renew every year. So with that, I basically end my presentation. And again, thank you very much for joining us today. I will pass the floor back to Jimmy and Alina for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Dato, for explaining the requirements for the investor and the business visa. And now we will open up the floor for Q&A. Okay, I think I have a first question here. First, before we start, we have limited time for this forum, so we will only pick some of the questions from the floor. So if you were unable to attend to your question, not to worry, our colleague and from Kitson and RAM will contact you personally to clear all your questions and queries. Okay, the first question is pretty much addressed to Scott and Thomas. Looking at the economy uncertainty, the question is, what happens if my money invests through RAM? If anything happened to RAM, will my money be all gone?
I don't think we'd have a business if that was the case. So actually, the security of capital is, your money is more secure if you invest through RAM than it would be if you invest through a fund of a big bank like Macquarie. And that sounds a bit strange, so let me explain it to you. So we have a gold-plated structure. In fact, I can actually, if I share this screen with you, I can show you what we're talking about. Whereby we have, it's an Aussie unit trust, so a mutual fund that has ourselves as the fund manager. Hopefully you can see that. Let me just pull this slide up. So we are the investment manager. These are the various funds that we've talked about that we have here. So the assets are held, if they're financial assets, they're held at National Australia Bank. So one of the biggest banks in Australia. We also have this entity here, which is the independent trustee. They are legally responsible for anything that goes into the fund. And then the third party is real asset management. So your money never goes to RAM, it goes into a mutual fund. The assets are held at a bank, and the biggest and oldest trustee, it's listed on the ASX in Australia, Equity Trustees are the legally responsible entity for the assets in the trust. RAM is purely the hired help on the side to look after and make sure we make good investment decisions. If RAM isn't there, your assets just stay in the fund and you can have them directed to wherever you want. So you have no exposure to RAM. It can go bust, it can go gangbusters, and it doesn't matter to you. What matters to you is the investment decisions that we make. Legally, these trustees are on your side and they will make sure that everything is taken care of in the unit trust.
Thank you, Scott.
那我用中文解释一下吧。那就是说，这个问题的话是这样子的：如基金公司在这个基金的这里面的这个角色呢，就是管理这个资产是怎么投的。那基金它本身是有这个受托人，它还有它的章程，还有它的这个托管行。那大家的角色是这样子的：托管行呢，就像是一个保险箱，所以您的资产都在这个保险箱里面。受托公司就是 trustee， 那 trustee 的话呢，它的作用就像是保险箱外面的警卫，也就是说，任何的这个投资的执行都必须要根据这个章程去执行。客户的钱只能给客户，客户的钱是不能转移给任何人。那客户的投资只能照着章程怎么写怎么投而已。也就是说，这个钱呢，必须是由这个 trustee， 就是说受托人就是说来根据章程来去做这个投资。那也就是说，今天 RAM 就是身为一个基金公司，基金公司呢，它今天要是有这个财务困难的话呢，实际上它是动不了这个钱。那第二呢，就是说这个钱就算基金公司没了，那信托公司跟托管行这些都是在的。那客户的这个钱呢，实际上它也不会凭空的消失，就是由客户接下来就是清算，由客户决定这个钱要去换个地方投，还是要怎么样要领出来。那这个结构是这样的，所以说在澳洲的这个投资结构之下呢，它对客户，它对投资人相对来说是有非常大的一个保护的。那假设举个例子好了，就是说如果客户他去跟其他就是跟银行做了这个投资那 实际上呢是由银行在为它又有多一层的这个结构来去为客户的这个投资再去多了一层结构来去做这个托管。也就是说，实际上今天如果银行倒了，那实际上银行的这个钱的受益人，这个投资的受益人是银行，银行它只是它在发给客户而已。那如果今天银行倒了，那这个会变成更麻烦。也就是说，透过银行投资，银行它又有一个托管平台来托管你的基金。那你跟我们投资是不需要这个托管平台的，所以也可以直接拥有这个基金里面的底层资产。那它相对来讲是更简单，那这个也是更安全的这么一个结构。
谢谢Thank you, Scott, for your explanation. The next question we have here is, I think it's in Chinese. Alina, 你可以帮帮吗？
好的，这边一个问题是给我们的Dato杨志成，陈先生问，办理188C 投资移民是不是一定要亲自去澳洲完成相关的流程？
好的，188C 你可以申请这个签证，比如说 onshore or offshore。onshore 就是说，如果你在澳洲，你申请那个188C 的签证，那好处是说，他会出一个 bridging visa 给你们住下去，然后就等你那个签证的消息。然后 offshore 假如说陈先生是在马来西亚你要申请这个188C 的 visa，我们的员工就会跟你一起准备那个文件，然后帮你去申请进去，然后你就一路在马来西亚等到那个签证批了，然后你们一家人就可以过去了。So the question that Alina actually raised is that if I'm applying for the 188 significant investor visa, do I need to be in Australia? So you can be in both ways, onshore or offshore. So if you are onshore, which is in Australia, when we lodge in the visa, you'll be given a bridging visa to stay on until the decision of the visa. If you're offshore, back in Malaysia, for example, if Mr. Chan is in Malaysia, we will be able to still process your visa and put in the application for you until the visa is approved, then you can move to Australia.
Okay, thank you, Dato. The next question is actually by Amy. She asks, is Australia as the world's 14th largest economy and rated AAA rating by the 3 global rating agency and have a stable growth at 2.7% for the last 5 years. This is before the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you all think that the Australia will able to upkeep the performance, or you're going to have a really bad recession coming?
I don't mind taking that. So I think on the charts that we showed earlier, you could see that we anticipate overall there'll be a negative growth rate this year in Australia. So just along with almost every other country in the world, there'll be a negative growth rate this year, and there will be a recession. So the first time in 30 years in Australia, there'll be a recession. I guess the main point that we were talking about earlier is how quickly will Australia recover, and will it recover more quickly than, say, Malaysia or wherever you're thinking about investing your money? And the answer to that is yes. I think it will, and I think by fourth quarter we'll be growing again. And you may remember the chart I showed earlier showed that Australian growth we anticipate to be about 5 or 6% next year. So it's not going to be immune, but the signs are that the recovery should be strong.
Okay, thank you. Thomas, will you care to do it in Chinese on this question?
Yep, no problems. 所以说澳洲的这个经济的话是这样子，就是说我们认为，就是说一个经济的下行是没有办法去避免的。那既然经济的下行是没有办法避免的，那重点是在于说你这个经济它的恢复是有多快。那我们认为今年的话，如果讲整体今年的平均应该会是负的，我们是这么认为。但是全球的大部分的国家呢，今年的这个经济平均应该也都是负的。那但是在这个疫情之后， 都会有一个所谓的报复性反弹。那这报复性反弹呢，我们估计明年澳洲的经济成长会是在6%左右。所以根据我们之前在我们之前的这个图表里面，它其实有个图表，它就有显示说澳洲接下来经济会是有个什么样子的走向呢？我们认为就说这短期之内，在今年到第3季为止，都是第3季可能就是一个不正不负吧，就是它不会有什么变动。但是在第2季，像这个季度实际上是会是比较差的一个情况。那到了这个第4季呢，我们认为第4季就是会有这么一个反弹，而明年2021年呢，我们的这个反弹估计会在6%。所以如果说要拿这2年的平均下来的话，实际上是能够维持的，但是是能够维持这个成长率的。那澳洲毕竟是一个成熟的经济体，所以说我们不认为，就是说它这个影响呢会是一时的而已。那这个长期来说呢，澳洲的这个经济成长呢还是能够去维持的。所以我们如果看长远的投资来讲的话，那么澳洲这边其实它的这个投资的这个成长，在经济的这个成长是能够去维持在一个稳定的一个状态。
Okay, thanks, Scott and Thomas.
You're welcome.
No problem. Okay. The next question here is, seeing that the Australian is spending more than most of the other country and the GDP forecast is better going to be 2021, how do you anticipate your client responding to it, and where do you anticipated their investment going to be? What is the recommended investment portfolio you foreseen your clients going to do?
I don't mind picking that up. So the first consideration, so let's say that obviously you have to invest in a certain way under investment visas such as the 188B and 188C investment. So really the government decides your asset allocation for you. But if you are free from those rules and you were just thinking about investing in Australia, I think the forecasted returns that we showed are relevant. So I think I will be cautious about, there may be a great buying opportunity in residential property, coming. So let's say if unemployment goes to 8, 9, 10% here, then you get a sell-off in residential property. That might be a good long-term buying opportunity, but probably not right now because actually prices haven't moved down yet, even though unemployment is picking up. But essentially, it's not picking up as quickly as we anticipated originally. I think cash will be very low. Bonds will give you a very low return. So you have to have, I think, the mentality there where you're looking for lower risk investments. So, for example, we have a credit fund that invests in bonds and in cash and in a loan book. We combine those, and if you combine different types of low risk investment, we can still get a return of around about 5, and I think that will be, it's already extremely popular, and I think it will be even more popular going forward because term deposits and bonds, regular bonds, are not that attractive. And then finally, if you have interest rates coming down, high quality commercial property, because you value it on a discounted cash flow model, those valuations will be well supported. And if you can have either office towers leased to the government, or in our case supermarkets, or if you can have low risk commercial property like medical property, that's why we focus on those areas, because they're not economically sensitive. So I think that chart that I showed earlier should guide people in where they might want to put their money.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Thomas? 那我来翻译一下 Scott 刚刚说的吧。那主要就是说，像现在利息的下滑，还有这些经济刺激的这些方案呢，那也会造成接下来的低利息还有低利率的环境。那这低利率的环境呢，大家的投资，首先我们先看这个房产市场。那住宅房产市场，那住宅房产市场它是对失业率非常敏感的这么一个市场。 那这一类别的资产呢，实际上在跌下来的失业率的会有渐渐的提升的趋势。那它的这个或许它会跌到一个价格，那就是说也可能是一个买进的好时机，但是现在还没有到那个地方，所以说现在我们还不认为是一个进入的一个时机点吧。那相对来讲的话，如果说是商业房产的话，像是医院或者是商场这些等等的，它是一个民生必需的物资，民生必需的这么一个物业吧。那它能够提供更稳定的这个现金流，还有更稳定的租金回报，所以接下来我们认为这是会是一个大家投资的一个热点。那当然，如果说是大额投资移民或者是有投资移民的限制的这些地方呢，那有投资移民限制的地方，这个投资那实际上你还是只能照着政府的要求去做。那当然，我们也会提供相应的在这个政府的合规投资要求的这个规格之内，我们能够给客户提供尽可能的就是一个保守还有安全的这么一个投资方案这样子。那当然也是根据客户的这个投资根据客户的这个投资偏好去定做的。Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you for your explanation.
谢谢我们的 Thomas， 谢谢。拿督杨志成这边有一个问题，陈先生还是在问，如果投资亏损会不会影响他转永居签证
？OK， 我就给你用比如说移民的条件，比如说假如说你是申请188C， 然后到时候你一开始要投资500万进去，500万是你的本钱进去，然后到你转到888的时候呢，它的文件只需要你证明你有第一次投资那个500万，然后在里面那个钱涨了多了，也许跌了少了，不会影响到你转888的。So the question that Mr. Chan asked again is about what happened if my investment lose money? Will it affect my permanent resident? So for the Department of Home Affairs legislation requirement is that at time of application, you are required to put, at time of decision, you are required to put in a $5 million investment into a compelling fund. Right? So once the money goes in, you meet the requirement. So when you convert into your permanent resident at the H stage, they will need to see that, okay, the fund has been invested, the first $5 million fund is in, and whether the fund increase or decrease, it has no effect in terms of your 888 application.
好的，谢谢纳督。我还有一个问题，这边也是中文。
OK， 好的。
对，这边的问题是给 Thomas 跟 Scott 的。客人问，投资多久可以退出？是否可以换产品呢？
那我来回答这个吧。那投资多久可以退出？那首先是在大额投资移民4年过后，也就是说，从签证下来到这个4年，从签证下来那天算起的4年之后，那这个投资其实就可以出来了，也就是说不受到这个大额投资移民的这个拘束了。但是如果在这个4年之间需要换产品的话，那这个也是没有问题的。但是在4年之内，要是要做这个转换的话，必须得合乎大额投资移民的这些规定，像是转换期间不能超过30天。那这个像平衡性投资呢，你不就是平衡性投资转到平衡性投资是没有问题的。那这个小型股票转小型就是换产品，这个是只要是在同一个类别之内，那这个都不会有太大的问题。那但是如果要换结构，甚至于投资在不是大额投资移民规定的这个投资的话，那这个就要等到大额投资移民4年到期之后，才能去修改自己的这个投资的策略。
Could you care to translate it to English, Dato?
If I can do it in English if that's easier.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. So you can. So with regards to switching between investments, as long as you switch within the category that is restricted by the Sib rules, that is fine. So you can actually switch between products, and we actually have one AA universal account structure which allows you to be able to switch between products very easily, and that is actually seamless, and it'll make sure that your investment is within the SIV guidelines. However, if you like to change structure, or if you want to invest into projects or products that are not within the SIV guideline, you can only do so after 4 years after your visa grant. So, and of course, this is something that you will always have to come back to Kitson to check and make sure that you have fulfilled your SIV criteria within the 4-year period. And that if they give you an okay, then you can go ahead and make your changes.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your explanation. The next one is by Miss Amy Ng. Okay, it's again about the security of the investment. After COVID-19, how secure will be investment in Australia? Because according to a statement, there are too many changes within the short period of time, and process may take a longer, and there was full of uncertainty. So, in general, a lot of people is a bit concerned about, at this present moment, if they were to do a large amount of investment, they are a bit concerned about what kind of risk exposure they will be exposing through their investment.
Is that generally, Jimmy, or within the 188C?
I think that would I think that would be two way. Okay, it could be generally, or it could be 188C. So the investor are more concerned about, if I were to do an investment now as a general investor or as a business investor for migration purposes, okay, will my investment be exposed to high risk, because due to a lot of uncertainty nowadays and a lot of changes happening quite recently?
Well, I guess the reverse order. So just answering for the migration related investments, the timing and the type of investments largely is governed by the rules. So, a 188C investor application may take a year, depending on where it's processed. And then you have 70 days to invest, and those investments must go into 3 different areas, and some of it is riskier, being equities and private equities. As I described earlier, we try and reduce the risk in those areas. And then some of it is much more lower risk investments, such as bonds, and in that bucket there's also commercial property. So in that, you haven't really got much choice if you want your visa. I would say, though, that potentially, right now investing in some of those markets, such as equities, may not be a bad thing, because if you take a 4 or 5 year view, you're investing in equities that are worth a maximum of $500 million. They're not small companies. That's probably a good entry point if you think that the world will normalize when we get a vaccine. So that's the 188C and the migration piece first. Thomas, why don't you translate that, and then we can talk more generally.
OK， 那我们先从大额投资移民相关的这个投资来做解释吧。那大额投资移民相关的投资的话呢，因为规定的关系，所以说你没办法去做很灵活的配置，你必须还是得跟着规定去走的。但是我举个例子，那从这个股票来讲的话呢，那股票的话，其实现在这个时候去买，可能是一个不错的时间点，因为毕竟澳洲的股票现在都是在属于一个相对低位的一个情况。那当然就是说，我们在这个大额投资移民合规投资里面，各种不同的合规要求，我们都有它相应的一个方案提供给客户，能够去做这个选择跟那个配置。像是平衡性投资的话，可以选择商业房产，那防御性的商业房产。股票的部分的话呢，我们有这个，当然就是一般的这个它是会跟着市场走的这种股票投资，但同时我们也有本金稳定的这个投资选项，可以让客户去做选择。那这些选择的话呢，我们会根据当时的市场情况跟客户的这个投资偏好来去给客户做这个搭配。那当然还有就是私募股权了。那私募股权的话，我们就是选择比较成熟的一些项目让客户去投。所以说，在这个当然就是说这个没有绝对吧，就是说没有绝对说一定安全一定不安全，但是在现在的这个大额投资移民的规定之下，我们会尽量会根据客户的这个投资需求来给客户做一个方案，做一个合适的这么一个搭配，把风险降到最低。Thank you, Scott.
So more generally, look, the world is a more uncertain place because of COVID-19. There's no doubt. But what you have to remember is if you look at MERS and SARS and other breakouts, there will always be an end point. And the end point we know will become when either herd immunity emerges or when we have a vaccine. So you could say realistically that would happen probably in Q1 or Q2 next year. So we've got about another year to go. So if you believe that, you know that the world will normalize at some point next year. So you shouldn't forget that. Then you have to sort of think about what it's going to be like during this period. You know, how bad will the lockdowns be, and therefore the economic slowdown, therefore unemployment, and so on. So I think we did have a very negative scenario in most of the world, including Australia, but that has got more positive more recently as the lockdown seems to have worked and we have very low cases now in Australia. So it's not as bad as it was for this period, but there will definitely be more, you should be more selective about the types of investments that you are thinking about. Because as we talked about earlier, certain investments will be fine, but others definitely will be impacted. So you should talk to, an investment specialist when you're thinking about investing in Australia.
那当然，在这段时间的话，我们从一个这个比较广大的一个角度来看，现在这个投资的这个环境呢，那毕竟在这个时候呢，这个时候的疫情之间的这不确定性其实还是蛮高的。那在疫情这段期间呢，跟后疫情时代的这个差别，就是说现在的投资，你或许有些投资它其实现在投是并不适宜的，那甚至有些投资你可能是更适合去等等。那我们建议就是说，在现在如果说有这个投资需求的话，建议还是跟这个专业人士去做这个咨询，来去了解说现在的哪一种投资，那适不适合您，那适不适合现在的这个经济情况。那当然就是说现在的，因为毕竟现在的投资有时候你是很难去判断说它接下来会是个什么，会是个什么，会是个什么情况吧。因为有的时候你有些投资，其实有些资产类别呢，它不会短期之内就有显现，它可能要过了疫情之后，在之后它才会慢慢的去显现说这个疫情对它的负面影响。当然就是说疫情是会结束的，因为如果说我们看历史的话呢，可能大概1年2年，甚至于就是说看更久以前，可能就是几年，就是一两年的时间吧。但我们认为是说，像这一次的疫情，可能我们在明年的第1季度就能够去有效的控制住这个疫情。但这段期间之内，这是一个判断。那在这段期间之内，这个投资要怎么样子去配置？那接下来后疫情时代会有怎么样子的一个对这个各种投资有什么样的影响？这些都是要纳入考虑的。那也是建议能够，如果说您有这方面的想法，那就尽量去咨询专业人士来为您在这方面做一些分析。
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I hope that clear your queries, Amy. If you have any further question, you feel free to contact us. All right.
我这边收到一个问题是，还是给 Thomas 跟 Scott。客人问了，持有188C 临时签证可以购买澳洲的2手房产吗？
那这个其实答案是可以的，就是说你可以买一个2手房产，但是这个必须得是自己住的。那当然还是需要经过澳洲这边的外国人审查，所以答案是肯定的，但是就只有一套。So I'll just repeat this in English. So you can buy a house in Australia, a second-hand house in Australia. However, you can only buy one because that's going to be your primary residence. It is still subject to further approvals. So just bear in mind. Or otherwise, yes, I think you know, if you really, I mean, if you want to buy new houses, new dwellings, that's fine. But used dwellings, you can only have one.
Thank you. Due to the time constraint, we will take the last question from the floor. If we were unable to attend to your question, not to worry, our team will contact you personally. Okay, the next question is, Scott, based on your presentation, you claim that you're able to deliver your promises to your client even up to last month in the midst of the COVID-19. Is it true? So if true, if I were to want to open an account with RAM and I'm in Malaysia and now I can't travel, how could I go around it?
Yes, it's true. I don't know how else to describe it other than that. Yes, it is. And we can follow up with some more detail on that performance and how it was broken down, if you like. But thankfully, you know, our commercial property in supermarkets and in medical property held up very well. We had that listing I mentioned came through on the private equity side during this period. So we've had some really good results. Again, it's not spectacular, but it really compensated for any weakness in other parts of the portfolio, such as equities. So that was how we did it. In terms of, we're very happy to help. So I visit Malaysia about 5 times a year when I can normally travel, but we also have Prissy Sue there, based in KL. So she can handle the account opening over there and look after you going forward. So I guess part of our proposition is that we look after people in Malaysia and Southeast Asia, and in fact in North Asia, as well as looking after them here. So yeah, it's very easy to open up an account with RAM, and Prissy can help you. She's listening. I know she's not on the video, but I know she's listening in.
那我们的客户，如果说您没办法来澳洲呢，想要开户的话呢，是可以找我们的我们在这个马来西亚有一位同事叫做 Prissy Sue， 那 Prissy Sue 他可以协助您从这个马来西亚在这边开户的。那当然就是说我们的绩效在这一阵子呢，也确实是达到了我们客户的预期的要求。那这个我们投的像是商业这个商场啊，还有超市啊，甚至于像是医院啊，在这段期间都有达到不错的这么一个回报。那当然了，就是说在疫情的期间，你不可能会有一个很大的一个涨幅，但是毕竟它还是能够为客户提供了一个稳定，而且能够可以预期的这么一个回报收益，这个投资回报率。那相对客户的这个客户现在的 feedback， 他们的这个反应呢，都还是比较正面的。那我相信这个在以我们的这个投资理念，那这个都是能够可以继续维持的。
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
谢谢 Thomas。这边还有一个问题是给我们的纳都杨志成的。李先生他问，188C 的签证需要考察申请人是否有成功的经商背景或者投资经历吗？
OK， 188C 刚才 based on 我的那个 PowerPoint 的时候，you can be a business owner or an investor 啊。假如说你是有投资的，也许你有做 business 的 ，but then the other pathway is also it can be gifted， so which mean 他也不会一定要看这个钱是你赚的，就是说，假如说爸爸就给儿子申请188C， 这个也是可以。
好的，谢谢纳都杨志成。刚刚接到最后一个那个问题，来自于黄太太，她说这个问题是给 Thomas 跟 Scott 的。她说申请人自己可以直接去管理投资金额吗？或者说需要交给定居在澳洲并拥有澳大利亚金融服务执照的专业投资人士来操作？
这个问题其实有点难回答吧。但是我们从2个层面来讲，首先你的这个大额投资移民的投资呢，是 你在大的投资移民的投资，实际上是底层资产你是不能自己去经营的，也就是说你不能自己去管的，就不能说我可以自己的钱去买几只股票，然后去买几个债券，这样子是不行的，一定要根据规定是一定要透过一个基金的信托结构去买。那为什么要用这个基金信托结构去买呢？就是因为基金跟这个基金信托的这个结构，它能够去束缚它的这个确保它的这个投资都是在合规的范围之内。所以说，澳洲政府它是会去相信它的这个基金的这个结构的。那你如果个人去做这个投资的话，其实大的投资移民其实很久以前是可以自己去做这个开个公司做投资的，但是现在不允许了。原因是什么？就是因为政府他觉得这个太难关。那再来就是说，我们的客户他跟我们做了这个投资之后，那客户在这个投资里面呢，他是有一定的他当然是他能够去有这个主控权来决定要怎么配置的。也就是说，虽然说你投的都是基金，那这个基金呢，它有医疗房产基金，有这个商场基金，有这个保守的本金稳定型的股票基金，然后有不同的这个风投，就是私募股权也有不同的项目。但是我们会充分的跟我们的客户沟通，来去为客户做一个最合适于他的这么一个投资的这么一个配置。所以说，从这个层面上来说，客户是有主控权的，毕竟是客户自己的钱。那客户他想要这个里面做什么样子的配置，来要求什么样子的回报，那有多少的风险，这个是我们能够跟客户讨论、充分的沟通之后，帮客户提供的这么一个服务。所以所以说从投资的角度上来看，客户的掌控性要看是从哪个层面来说。客户自己去成立一个基金，这个是不行，因为你要成立这个基金，你还要达到澳洲政府要求的门槛，你才能合规，不是随便一个人来成立这个基金，那你就可以合规的。但是你在投到像我们公司的特色，就是说客户在跟我们投资，我们不会跟客户就说你投一个产品这个就行了，我们是给客户多种选择，让客户去做一个最适合他的一个配置。那我们这边确保客户的投资是合规，还有同时在这个资产的配置之下，能够达到最佳的效应、最好的回报，这是我们的工作。所以说有这么样子的这么一个不同，所以这个问题要看是从哪个层面来出发吧。So I'll just repeat what I said in English. In terms of wanting control over your invested assets, there are two ways to look at this. So you can't actually control in a sense where you can't set up your own fund or you can't just go and buy a property and say, okay, I'm done with balanced investment, buy some shares and go, okay, I'm done with the emerging companies. It doesn't work like that. You will need to invest through an investment fund or a trust that is qualified under the Sib rules, which means you need certain years of experience, you need license, and all those sort of requirements. Now, so from an underlying asset, or if you want to set up your own trust, that's not possible due to regulatory requirements. But if you invest through a company like MARN, you do have the control and the flexibility in terms of managing your assets in different products that will suit your investment style, your investment appetite, and your risk profile. And that's essentially our job, not to just manage the assets, but also to help you, to guide you along the way in your investment journey and to achieve the best results over the course of the 4 years. You can switch your assets with your investment within the 4 years. And, the market does change. It's not going to stay unchanged for 4 years. So there will be very likely a scenario that you will switch your investments, and we're here for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. I'm afraid that's all the time that we have for today. For those who are unable to attend to your question, not to worry. As I said, our colleague will contact you personally after this discussion. And thank you, Scott. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Dato. So the last but not least, I will share the contact of our team. If you will be interested or any question, you could directly contact them for the, how should I put it, for any question that you have.
Yeah. And thank you from our side, guys. Thank you, Dato, and thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Elena, for having us. If we've enjoyed participating, and hopefully we do a few more of these.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's good that we can do it at this time of pandemic over the Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Jimmy, you haven't shared the last slide yet.
So these are the contact details for our team member. So those who are interested, you can feel free to call all our team member with the numbers there. And thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.